What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt, NJ.com, here with the latest episode of the No-Huddle Show. We're out here in Tampa Bay, and we have a very special guest / announcement. We officially, I've known this for a couple weeks. I've had to keep it secret, even as I recorded the last couple episodes. We have our new host, our new co-host, my new co-beat writer, Mike Kaye.
Hey,
how's it going,
up?
Mike? Why don't you tell them a little about yourself, where you're from, what beat you're coming from, and then we'll get into the game.
Yeah, sure. So I used to cover the Jacksonville Jaguars up until that AFC title run, and kind of week one, and then starting over from scratch in week two with the Eagles. And before that, I used to cover the Eagles for Bleeding Green Nation and SB Nation. So I'm excited to be back to my roots and excited to be working with you.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll delve more into Mike's background and stuff in the mid of the week, but we're here for the post-game pod. What you guys want to hear us talk about, which is an Eagles loss 27-21 to the 2-0 Buccaneers with Ryan Fitzmagic just bringing that magic again. But before we do get into the discussion, I just want to remind you guys you got to make sure to subscribe to this podcast. We're on all the podcast apps. We're on iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spreaker, the Apple Podcast app, Google Play, Spotify, SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter, too, at Zack Blatt, at Mike_E_K, and at the No Huddle Show. We're going to have new episodes pretty frequently now that Mike's in the mix. After every game, probably a couple during the week, at least one during the week, probably two. And, yeah, we're looking forward to getting that thing going. But, yeah, we'll get into this game. The Eagles, it was a tough loss. They pretty much right away they got banged up. On that first drive, Jason Peters left the game with a hamstring thing. That happened earlier in the week, and he tried playing on it. Didn't work. Jay Ajayi left the game with a back injury. Didn't come into the second half. The next possession, Mike Wallace, who they expected to play a bigger role this week, hurt his ankle, looked pretty serious, had a boot in the locker room. I mean, you got to come out of this game not feeling very great, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think you could look at it two ways, right? They have a lot of injuries. But if you want to look at it through the Nick Foles glasses, they battled. They put themselves in a position to win. They weren't out of it with 2 minutes left in the game. Obviously the defense couldn't hold the Buccaneers from getting a first down and getting the ball back to the offense with enough time to take advantage. But I think when you look at this team overall, there's so much talent and depth that sometimes you realize, hey, they're doing well, but they're also missing all of this talent. You look at, like you said, Mike Wallace, Jason Peters, Darren Sproles,
Alshon Jeffrey,
Carson Wentz, and this team's still just 1-1 with the potential.
They could have won this game today.
They could have won this game. I mean, this game really came down to two massive plays of 75 yards. That's really what that's what it was. Yeah. And we'll get.
It's a tackle away from that not happening, or like somebody not blowing a coverage from that not happening. So
right. And I think the corners will get a lot of blame for those plays, as they should. But when you really look at this game overall, the Buccaneers made big plays. The Eagles really didn't. Sure, you could talk about the Jenkins forced fumble, but that led to no points. You look at the early Fletcher Cox sack, that really didn't lead into anything. The Ronald Darby interception was important, but again,
it was kind of fluky, yeah.
It was fluky. So you look at that on offense, there were some other fluky plays, the Zach Ertz 34-yarder where Nick Foles threw it up to the point where he had to make a spectacular catch, and he was wide open.
If that's his throwing down the field, then he's not really throwing down the field.
Right. You could look at the explosive play from Nelson Aguilar where he caught the ball on a slant and took it upfield and made a couple of guys miss. Those aren't plays that are always sustainable, and they definitely weren't in this game. And I think when you look at Nick Foles' performance, 74. I guess he finished because the stats.
His final stats were 35. He was 35 of 48, which is a lot of passes. Right. 334 yards, one touchdown, no picks.
So he's completing more than 70% of his passes, but he's also targeting guys,
3 yards
out.
He was putting his guys in danger a few times too.
Yeah. The throw downfield on 4th and 10 to Corey Clement was one of the scariest collisions I've seen live in several years.
It looked like Clement was fine. He was in the locker room talking.
Right. Yeah, he was good, but watching that, that stopped the game for quite a long time. So I think overall, everybody takes ownership in this loss, but it's a matter of, hey, do you think Carson Wentz makes that much of a difference and that this team is not in trouble, or are you concerned that, hey, these injuries are piling up like they did last year, and maybe they don't have the talent like LeGarrette Blount or Patrick Robinson who are stepping up out of nowhere to take over?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should touch on the quarterback. We should touch a little bit more on Foles. I think you mentioned his stats. He came into this game. Him and Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's kind of interesting because they're both the backup quarterback in theory, at least. I don't know if Fitzpatrick will stay the backup. Through 2 weeks, he has 8 touchdowns. He had 4 tonight. He was 27 of 33, 402 yards. He had that one interception where it was deflected off of O.J. Howard, I think, or he tried catching it and he dropped it and then flew up into the air and Darby had an easy pick. So it kind of doesn't even. I mean, it counts, but it doesn't really. And he just torched. We're going to talk about the secondary in a little bit. He torched that secondary.
And he's one of the most athletic tight ends in the league.
Yeah.
And that's why he was drafted in the first round out of Alabama. At the Senior Bowl I covered a couple of years ago, he was treating all these kids like they were little boys, and he was just a guy catching all. So he is like a superior athlete. Don't get that twisted. But the fact that he was able to get by the entire secondary at his size.
And on a 75-yard catch, I think Darby tried tackling him high.
Yeah. And
you don't do that when you're as small as Darby is. That's just not going to. There's bad tackling technique from the secondary, especially from him and Mills.
I thought.
I guess let's talk about the secondary right now. That was problematic tonight.
Right. I think the linebackers and the secondary didn't tackle well. I mean, I also, you talk about the O.J. Howard thing, the touchdown. Jordan Hicks got beat pretty badly on that catch in coverage. I think overall they didn't tackle very well in short yardage opportunities, whether it was a dump off or a run. You saw that late in the game too. That's why they were unable to get the ball back to the offense. I think overall the defense struggled today. I mean, for me, it's a matter of, Fletcher Cox left for a little bit. They did have tackling problems. Jalen Mills obviously does not cover very well downfield. It's just that's a problem.
Yeah, on that first play, he didn't have good position on Deshaun. Malcolm Jenkins took responsibility for that, but Mills still didn't cover it very well.
Correct.
That's just the reality. I mean, this whole all of training camp and preseason and dating back to OTAs, a lot of the talk's been about how Jalen and Ronald Darby have been kind of the standouts. They looked really good. It kind of felt like a breakout year for both of them. It seemed like Week 1 kind of stuck to that a little bit. Mills struggled still. He had a couple bad plays. He got targeted quite a bit. Darby was a star in Week 1. He was really good. He fell back a little bit more down to earth this week, but I mean, I know this is your first game covering them, but coming out of this, what'd you kind of think of those two guys, and how do you think do they need to fix something going forward? Is there something they need to fix?
I've been high on Darby since he came out of college, so I think this is an opportunity for him to have a Pro Bowl year. Obviously, this is my first game covering, but I obviously watched the Week 1 game against Atlanta, and he did stuff to Julio Jones that not a lot of corners can do.
I mean, he made the game-winning play, shoving him out of bounds on that last catch. Yeah,
and Julio's no small guy. I think this was just a bad matchup for both of them because of how much speed that both Mike Evans, who is a speed and size mismatch, and Deshaun Jackson have. Those guys were able to get open pretty regularly. You're not going to face a wide receiver group like that very often. But yeah, Jalen Mills, I'm concerned about the way he bites on double moves. It's extremely consistent. It pops out on film. It pops out to other teams on film clearly.
I mean, when you have him going against a guy like Deshaun Jackson, you just can't bite on that.
Right, you can't make mistakes. I mean, I personally wouldn't have put him on.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Deshaun, because he doesn't have the long end speed to keep up with him, whether he has safety help or not. And then I think when you look at the Sidney Jones situation, I mean, he's fully recovered from his Achilles injury. Why not have him play more outside and have Jalen Mills play in nickel? Because really, Jalen Mills is the perfect player for the nickel spot. It seems like it's more of I don't want to predict too much, but it almost kind of seems or read into it too much, but it's almost like they feel like Mills earned his job last year for this year. And to me, you drafted Sidney Jones because you thought he could be an elite playmaker at corner. Mills still is that 6th, 7th round pick that you didn't invest a ton in. And while he played well last year, he could do really well at nickel. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The Eagles clearly they value how guys have looked in practice. I think that's become pretty obvious based on a lot of their decisions on offense. And Sidney Jones has been almost exclusively running in the slot. and this is really his first like full off season. So I don't think they're ready to move. I don't know this season. I don't think they're going to make a change like that. Whether they should or not, I don't know. I just don't see them because Mills didn't really practice. He was one of the guys that didn't really practice in the slot, which I was surprised because it seemed like the impression that a lot of us kind of had coming in was maybe they would, when Sidney Jones would come in, they would move Mills inside and put Jones on the outside. Jones, I didn't hear his name at all tonight, which is probably a good thing, which means he probably didn't really give up much. We'll see the numbers better on Pro Football Focus this week. But yeah, I don't think they need to move. I don't think they need to make that kind of a. It's not a drastic move. I don't think they need to make that change just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's an immediate change, but it's something that I would consider, or maybe rotate them, or maybe just based on look. Like, to me, the NFL's a game of matchups, and that's why you have guys like Fletcher Cox, who's incredible at rushing. I mean, you saw he just
that sack he had in the beginning, yeah,
77, like it was nothing. It was like you and me, just
He's on a mission to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. He's like he's trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean,
you need to get the sacks to do that. So
yeah, now he's at 2 sacks. He leads the team, and I mean, I think the problem for the defensive front is there were several free rushers in the first half that just clear to the quarterback, and they could not get to him. Fitzpatrick got the ball out quickly. I thought he led the Buccaneers pretty well. I mean, as much as we're saying, hey, coverage is responsible for all this other stuff, Fitzpatrick played a great game. And I think, Dirk Cutter's opened up that offense. That's not what he's really known for. He's known for being more conservative. But they took shots downfield. They were fearless. Fitzpatrick's obviously feeling himself, and I think...
Man, you see that outfit he had in post-game?
Yeah.
He looked like Conor McGregor. He had no shirt on. He had like a jacket. I think he said he got it from Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, that looks like something Deshaun would wear.
Yeah. But we were just talking to like a Buccaneers beat guy, and he was like, a year ago, like I would never have believed he would do something like that. That's just like he's just so confident. He's just living his best life right now, and good for him.
Sometimes you got to live, Nigel Bradham had an okay game from
first game back, yeah.
Yeah, I think he is a guy that kind of stirs the drink. Just from afar watching, he's kind of the guy that makes everything move on defense.
Jim Schwartz just said he's the heartbeat of the defense. I think they kind of rely him in the middle of it, yeah.
Well, and that's a pretty big superlative when you consider a guy like Malcolm Jenkins being in the defense too, and Chris Long and all those guys.
Yeah.
So I think for this team, Brown getting his legs under him. Remember, the Eagles lost week 2 to the Chiefs last year, and that was kind of like the turning point where they won I believe it was 9 straight games, and carried some momentum, got into what they needed to do. This could be a similar situation this year. It felt like a loss today, but it wasn't. It was a disappointing loss in the immediate, but to me, like, there's so many positives that you can project onto this loss. If that does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think, like...
I mean, they were in it right until the end, even if they had no business being in it.
Yeah, they had no business being in this. Let's make that clear. The first half was atrocious, but, it was the most Nick Foles game I've ever... I can recall in, like, in a
He
really
was
long
both
time.
terrible and amazing all in the course of 4 quarters.
Well, and
he had his first touch, by the way, his first touchdown pass. It almost took him 8 quarters to get his first touchdown pass of the season.
Yeah, I mean...
After he just was... raking the Patriots and the Vikings in his last 2 games last year.
Well, and that throw was something else.
Yeah, the touchdown to Aguilar, it was like in the corner. It was a great catch, kept his feet in, but yeah, the placement of that ball was like Super Bowl level.
No one in the press box, like, I think maybe a few of us were like, yeah, that's a catch, and other people were like, did he catch it? Like that's how
it was like kind of he just dropped it in there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Foles is capable of really impressive things. He's also capable of doing some not so impressive things.
Where you're like, wait, why are you an NFL quarterback? Like, he has a lot of throws like that. You're like, wait, what?
He does this thing in the pocket where, like, he's got a weird mobility function because sometimes it looks like he is literally running in molasses, and then there's other times where he actually looks pretty agile.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a weird...
I even heard you a few times, like, he had some pretty clear open field at a few points. You're like, run!
Yeah, I was like, I mean, there was the 2-yard gain to Zach Ertz where he literally waited. I felt like we were at the DMV, like, waiting in line for this guy to throw this
Nice,
back.
that was good.
Thank you. I like references. You guys will learn that about me pretty frequently.
Got some of the Office references.
Right. Oh, yes, we will, my friend. But, like, to me... I brought up this quote from Dwight Schrute the other day.
There you go.
Nostalgia
Love that.
is one of the great human weaknesses, second only to the neck. There is a lot of nostalgia with Nick Foles because of what he has been able to accomplish.
Eagles fans need to hear that.
Well, no, I mean,
Dwight needs to preach it. No, because
I get it.
Yeah.
Believe me, I get it.
I mean, he brought a Super Bowl to this town. Like, there's no question about it. But
he's going to be a legend forever.
He's both allowed to be like a legend in the city of Philadelphia and also not a great quarterback. Like that's a lot. Those two things are allowed to be true.
And my wife tells me, "Yeah, it was great of you to bring me flowers, but you forgot to walk the dog, and he peed in the house." It's like you can do two things.
Yeah,
you can be both.
You can love him and be like, "Oh man, he kind of isn't good."
Right, and so like for me. We joked about it on Twitter because I got that email about how.
By the way, I think it was a record. This was his first game he covered for us, second day technically, but kind of his first day.
Right.
Within, this had to be within 30 minutes of the story, maybe like within an hour of the story posting. His report card for Nick Foles, he had somebody emailing him like anger about the way he spoke ill of their beloved Nicky.
By the way, he had an uneven game, but I give him a B for the whole game. I mean, I if that's like negative, I don't really know what to do. So, for me, I just think with Nick Foles, he's a guy that needs that. Oh my gosh, how did this happen? Play to kind of feel like the Philly that they ran.
Yeah, that changed everything.
That changed literally everything. So you need that like bizarre play, and I think for this game, it was that. Ridiculous Josh Perkins catch that was kind of like it looked almost like he was trying to throw it downfield in a way, and Perkins somehow grabbed it. And I mean, and they scored on that third touchdown drive. I think Jay Ajayi not being in the game, that was tough.
Yeah, he came back in the second half. His first play was a 20-yard rush, and you could kind of feel everything changing after that.
Right. I mean, I think Jay Ajayi is so important to this offense. I think with LeGarrette Blount moving to Detroit, you need a guy who can be a steamroller. I thought Corey Clement was fantastic today.
He looked good.
They have a really this is like one of their better duos.
Yeah.
That they
as a group, there's probably not as much depth as they maybe need,
right.
Especially if Sproles isn't himself.
LaShawn McCoy is better than both players put together, but when you look at group, duos, this is Westbrook and Buckhalter. It's only their reverse roles,
and their skill sets complement each other pretty well too. Because
right,
Ajayi can get those. I mean, Clement was a goal line back last year actually, but today it was more Ajayi, and Clement's developed into his pass catcher. He had 100 yards in the Super Bowl, obviously, but I think he had 5 catches tonight on 6 targets. Kind of helped keep the offense moving a little bit. I mean, they were still kind of stagnant in that first half. But yeah, the running backs, if they're healthy, Ajayi has injury problems, and I think that's why he might have trouble getting the money he wants this offseason, especially from the Eagles. We talked about this. I don't know if they're going to re-sign him. I don't know if it makes my sense to. But I mean, let's go back to Nick Foles for a second. I mean, the assumption right now, there was a report before the game from Adam Schefter that Wentz is expected to be cleared, and there's a good chance he plays in Week 3 against the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go 2 kind of different paths to this. So, assuming he plays next week, how confident are you that he can come in and the offense gets back to what they expect out of it? And number 2, if he doesn't play, how confident are you that Nick Foles can lead this team to wins in his absence?
So this will be an interesting and yet probably understated in the moment storyline, but Frank Reich knows both of these guys so well.
If anybody knows them too, it's him.
Right.
Him and DeFilippo, who's in Minnesota right now.
Yeah, so for me, he knows both their weaknesses. He knows how to plan for these guys. The Colts aren't going to be a pushover. They just beat the Redskins.
So who would that be more problematic for, you think, if they're playing?
I think Nick Foles.
Yeah, I agree.
I think definitely
his weaknesses are more defined.
Correct. And I think Carson, whether he's got his full mobility, which it seems like he does, he's looked great. He looked great today, and I know you saw him in Week 1. You said he looked pretty good before the game. But, Carson is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks we've seen in a really long time. And not just because he's got the mobility, it's his ability to extend plays not just with his feet, but his arm. The throw that he made in Seattle downfield I don't know. I forgot who the receiver was, but it was one of the best throws you could possibly make falling back.
I mean, that's kind of a problem. Foles, when he's under pressure, he kind of just looks for the closest guy almost. He's not able to really see it like Ertz cutting open somewhere else down the field. He made a weird play where he was going to the right and he threw back to the left, which is it completed, but that's not a throw you ever should make. Right. And he just isn't able to. When the offensive line had one of their worst games I've seen in a while. Peters went down early in the game. Vitae, it wasn't only his fault. He kind of improved as the game went along, but I think there was 12 quarterback pressures from Tampa Bay. He got sacked 3 times. That Foles isn't a player that can play like that. Most quarterbacks aren't, but Foles certainly cannot.
Yeah, and I think he's a rhythm guy, and it was hard to get into a rhythm when you have the offensive line drawing 40 yards worth of penalties early on, and you have guys leaving the game. I think Carson can make more with less than Nick Foles, if that makes sense. There were injuries all around, but I mean, during that playoff run,
not to cut you off, but he can when he was healthy. We don't know how he's going to look coming off on that knee stuff.
That's fair. But
it's all theoretical right now.
But I think if you're going to play him in week 3,
you assume
he's the
you don't put him out there unless he can do what Carson Wentz can do.
Right, because if you're putting him out there to just be a pocket passer, you might as well stick with Nick Foles, right? So that gets us back to our 2 questions. So that's second question of, do I think Nick Foles should stay out there? Unless they are 100% about Carson Wentz starting and think he is ready to go, he can take hits, he can do everything. There's a difference between being cleared for contact and being able to take a hit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't taken a hit since December when he got injured.
Right, I don't know, it'd be stupid.
How does he get up when he gets tackled?
Right, so you don't know. I mean, he's a confident guy, he's a guy that says that his playing style won't change, but, ACLs are ACLs.
I talked to David Chow. He used to be, I'm sure you know who that is. He was, I think he was the Chargers doctor a while ago. He writes a cool column now, and he told me there's no chance he's 100% this season. He'll maybe later in the year. He won't be back to his mobile self, and mainly because of that, until next season. That's kind of so. As long as his point was as long as you go into this not expecting him to be the full Carson Wentz, then that's fine. He has the throwing ability to still survive. But I think fans need to temper their expectations that he's going to come in and all the problems are going to be solved right away.
Well, and that's the thought process too. If he's not going to be 100%,
then why even bring him back? Yeah.
Well, and that too. But if he's not going to be 100%, where do you think the ceiling is for him? Right. So if you think the ceiling for him is 85%, and he's not going to get better than 85% during this season, is 85% better than Nick Foles 100%?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's something that I think you have to weigh. But I think with Nick Foles, he can win you games.
He can. I feel he can not lose you game.
Right.
Not to say he can be the one that doesn't lose the game for you. I feel that's where he's at right now in his career.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I think game manager is the wrong word. Yeah. I would say
because he can do more than a game manager, but he can also be worse than a game manager.
Right.
He's the most unique quarterback in that play.
And you can't say a steady hand. I mean, his good is top 15 quarterback. At times top 10. His bad is middle of the road backup. So that's the thing. You can count on his experience. You can count on the fact that he's going to be fearless, and you can count on the fact that he's a really good leader. But Carson Wentz is all 3 of those and uniquely talented. And so I think that's the draw of Carson. That's why everybody wants him back. That's why everybody has fallen in love with him in the city of Philadelphia. And I also think the offense needs a shot in the arm. I said this on our watch post, the video we did. Thank you for holding the camera, by the way. This offense needs a shot in the arm, and sometimes you can get by. I think Nick Foles' performance, I think the shot in the arm for the Eagles last year was the crazy play with Keanu Neal, where the ball knocked off his knee and went into Torrey Smith's hands, and they were oh wow. Sometimes you're feeling yourself, you know what I mean? That's all you need sometimes. And I think Carson Wentz starting off week 1 sells a play action fake, bombs one down to Nelson Aguilar, who is developing into a superstar.
He's so good.
He's so good. And it's not just in the slot. That's the thing. Everybody was oh well,
he's been playing a lot of outside,
right,
with Alshon out, yeah.
I mean, a lot of people, the theory was around the league is that, oh, cool, he's in the slot. They found the perfect spot for him. No, he's just developed like Mike Rowe.
He just wasn't ready those first 2 years.
Right. Some guys, it takes a lot longer. I mean, USC wide receivers have a history of developing a little bit slower. Marquise Lee, who I'm coming...
Yeah, I was going to say, he might secretly be, if you consider all the guys that have busted out of USC wide receivers, he kind of secretly been the best one.
Right. And I remember talking to Marquise Lee about Nelson Aguilar, and he said that dude is so dynamic. It's a mental thing, man. And I think once you mentally get it as a wide receiver, you can be unstoppable. For him, the best thing that could happen for Nelson Aguilar is Carson Wentz coming back, because they need to take deeper shots. They need to improve his confidence. Yeah, he catches every ball that's thrown his way. I mean, it's remarkable. I also think with Zach Ertz, too. Zach Ertz, he caught 11 passes today, but he caught 10 passes for 60 yards if you don't count the 34-yard gain. And that's not to slight him, but I think he's kind of in a funk. He does not seem like the dynamic tight end. I think last year he was a top 5 tight end at worst.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to get over too, and sometimes you just need that shot in the arm.
So going off that, I just thought of a semi-hot take.
Oh, go for it. We need to
fill
that quota.
What about? Okay, let's say Wentz isn't actually going to play this week. What about Nate Sudfeld? I know he doesn't have big time experience. It's a risk, and I get that. But how much worse could he really be than Nick Foles? And I think the ceiling is higher for him. He can throw the ball down the field. He showed that in the preseason, admittedly, and it wasn't even with the Eagles as top receivers. A lot of guys were out. Shot in the arm. He's athletic. He can move. I know you like him a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's probably too quick turnaround to start giving first team reps and do that, and maybe you wait and to see if Foles is struggling in the start of the game to consider it. But I don't know, man. That offense is just stagnant. It takes Foles so long to get going. He's been getting going late in the games the last 2 weeks, and at a certain point, that's just not going to work once you start playing against teams like the Vikings and stuff like that. In theory, if Wentz stays out even longer.
So I have a similar hot take. I don't think you can bench Nick Foles after this game. I think that Nick Foles isn't the reason this team lost today. I don't believe that.
I don't think he's the reason, but he wouldn't have been the reason they won either.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I said this in my report card that he led 3 scoring drives, but he wasn't really the catalyst for any of that success. I mean,
and as I got a lot of pushback because at one point I was like, he's completed 20 passes and he had less than 200 yards at that point. I'm like, maybe you start throwing it down the field, and as people pointed out, to who?
Right.
It's not his fault, but he still has to take those shots.
But that's why Carson Wentz is so, the Carson Wentz of old.
And I think Sudfeld would, by the way. But
right.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at that Week 17 game, and he was playing.
He did do the conservative thing, but right. I think he's a different player now than he was then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think having that experience, knowing you have a ring under your belt, I think the team was very confident in him if Nick would have gone down. And I think people around the league really like him. He's come up in a lot of conversations that I've had with people around the league, and I think, look, if they want to shop Nate next year or sign him to a restricted tender, maybe you do take, the Colts are starting 3 rookie linebackers, and they don't really get a lot of pressure. Yeah, they won against the Redskins, but the Redskins' first Week 1 win seemed kind of fluky.
Yeah, it seems like the Cardinals are very bad. So
yeah, so to me, do you punt? You don't punt, obviously. You don't punt the game, but do you say, hey, look, we've got 1 more week to wait for Carson? Do we want to see what Nate Sudfeld does? To me, if I'm Nick Foles...
If there was a game you were going to test out Nate Sudfeld, it's this week.
Yeah, no, if I'm Nick Foles personally and I'm looking at the long-term future, did I help or hurt my stock?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, honestly. Yeah.
To me, and it's something we'll probably touch on later in the week once we find out if Carson's ready or not. Did Nick Foles help him? Because to me, yeah, he didn't lose them either game. He wouldn't have been the reason, but he wasn't the reason why they would have won in either game, in my opinion. So I think Nick's going to get starting money somewhere next year. I don't think that's a question, but does he get his preference? You know what I mean?
And is it a 1-year deal? Is it a prove it thing?
Right. I mean,
Because he's someone who I think his next spot, he probably wants that to be where he finishes out his career. Because
Sure.
he talks a lot about his family and his daughter and stuff like that. So.
Well, and he said even today, I've been playing this game for a long time. And that's like, that wasn't eerie.
And he's not even 30 yet.
Yeah, that wasn't eerie to me, but it was just like, it was like one of those, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Like,
That's the thing. You think about it, he's not even 30 yet, and the things he's been through in his career, he had that amazing season with the Eagles. He had a bad season next year. Chip Kelly dumped him off on the Rams. He was miserable in the Rams. He almost quit football. Went to the Chiefs for a year. Came back to the Eagles. He was supposed to be an underpaid backup, and then he became the Super. Like it's the most unique.
And now people send me emails about how terrible I am because I gave him a B.
And now I'm out here saying he should be benched for a guy who's played one NFL game. So
well, I think the most interesting thing for me coming here is seeing how the fan base and how the coaching staff and locker room handle that success. I think a lot that was brought up a couple of times, but I think a lot of people try to dismiss that. I think that's a relatively logical. I mean, you see in sports teams win championships and then just drop off. The Detroit Pistons, when they traded for Rasheed Wallace, wow, they had that awesome half year and won an NBA Finals.
I mean, even think about the Phillies. They won the World Series. They were really good the next year after that. They went all in, traded for a bunch of guys, lost in the first round, and I'm not even sure if they've been back to the playoffs since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the mental side of sports, especially in football, is something that can look at the Baltimore Ravens. What have the Baltimore Ravens done since they won that Super Bowl?
They've kind of hovered around 8 wins every year.
Right. There's teams like the Seahawks. They got the
Giants.
The Giant. Right. There's a lot of people, Jacksonville, my former beat, were curious to see how this team was going to respond
to being good. Yeah.
And then they just whooped the Patriots. I mean, it's one of those things where
you just don't know. Yeah.
You've got to be mentally tough. You have to have the right guys in the locker room. And this team does.
Yeah.
I was in the locker room for 25 minutes. I can already tell you just from the interactions, this locker room is, and talking to you, this locker room is there. You know what I mean?
The funny thing is, you just came from the Jaguars, who have a guy like Jalen Ramsey who will say what he's thinking. He'll say if a guy is playing bad on his team or another team. The Eagles just... Everybody respects each other so much in the locker room. We won't have that this season unless everything goes off the rails. People can try and nag Nick Foles on into talking crap about how he deserves to start or whatever, but he deflects. Jalen Mills had a bad game today. He Malcolm Jenkins took responsibility. Jalen Mills was we just can't let those plays happen. You won't find guys in this locker room speaking ill of other teammates in this locker room.
Yeah, and
that says something.
But and I think that's why they were so successful last season when Nick Foles was not playing well against Oakland, not playing well against Dallas towards the end of that season. They still, Alshon Jeffrey wasn't getting targeted, in games. Everybody stayed the course, and that's what worked out. And, I wrote a post about Josh Gordon being available. I don't want to get too far up topic, but that's the reason why you don't trade for a guy like him, who could be a possible distraction, who could be a guy that gets...
You got to weigh the risk against the reward.
Right, exactly. And I think when you consider Nick Foles, I think guys are going to back him no matter what. I mean, people would be really excited to have Carson Wentz back. You talked to Jason Peters and Lane Johnson today. Tell me what came out of that conversation.
Yeah, well, they both kind of Lane in particular, he had his token line that he said a few times now. He's like, someone asked him so what if Wentz came back? He's like, well, then the sheriff will be back in town. But then he kind of realized but we support Nick, we're 100% behind him, we're confident in Nick. Peters the same thing. A couple guys in the locker room, you can kind of tell there's a part of them where they're we'd be pumped if Carson Wentz came back, and also we support Nick 100%. They don't have to throw that part in, but they do.
Well, and I think that's a reflection of their coach.
Yeah,
and I think Doug Peterson's a guy who, above anything else, is fair to his locker room. And I think, Doug Marone's the same way. The Dougs. Yeah. I think that has a massive effect on your players.
Yeah. All right. I think we covered all the ground. I think that was a good first episode for you.
I like to ramble. It's good.
That was a good combo. we're getting these back in the mix. We hope you enjoyed that one. Again, remember, you gotta leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star review. I mean, it doesn't have to be 5 stars, but we'd love it if you did 5 stars. Leave a question in there. We'll answer it on the podcast. Send us questions. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Zack Blatt, ZackBlatt. He's at Mike Kaye, at Mike_E_K. Subscribe. We're on all the apps, iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, SoundCloud. Thanks for listening. We'll have another one at some point in the middle of the week. Mike, how'd your first one go? How'd you like it?
I felt good, man. I like you leading this thing. I think that's cool. I like you being the Carson Wentz and me being the Alshon Jeffrey. Hopefully, we both recover in time from this initial podcast to have even better episodes.
For sure. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.